I'm John DeMont, a columnist with the SaltWire Network. Now, you don't often hear about anybody starting something as quite astounding as a radio station anymore. But that is exactly what an intriguing mix of folks along the south shore of Nova Scotia are doing early in the new year. I'm joined today by Don Sedgwick, a board member of CVRCS, a community radio station based in Petite Riviere, which will cover the south shore of Nova Scotia all the way up to Vogler's Cove. So, Don, you're part of a group starting a radio station, which is very exciting and which doesn't happen every day in the year 2022. Tell us how this came about. This C, and just so I get the initials right, CVCRS.
That's right. Coastal Villages Community Radio Society. Coastal Villages Community Radio Society. And that's the umbrella group that has undertaken this project. The actual radio will just have the 4 letters, Coastal Villages Community Radio. And it came about through a conversation I had with Eric Husfeld, who was our local councillor, who at one point was a DJ for CKBW here in Bridgewater. I think he read the news, and he casually mentioned it to me as a project that he thought would be worth undertaking here. I was excited about the idea, spoke to several people, and the project has grown. Well, it's gone like wildfire. It seems unstoppable, and we managed to pull together some extraordinary talent that was in the community. Some of these people I had only heard about it and hadn't met, and next thing you know, I think we're a month or 2 away from our first live broadcast. And so the initial idea was back in the spring and summer. We got serious about this in August, and since then we've done a lot of work to get ready for the next big stage.
Yeah. No, I love the way you describe the group coming together. It really reminds me of the beginning of the Magnificent Seven when Yul Brynner and Steve McQueen were going around recruiting people with various sort of skill set. Just tell us a little bit about the who's Charles Bronson here and who's
sure who's driving the getaway car and who's doing the dynamite. The president and one of the first people I spoke to is a fellow named Lou Putney. Lou lives in LaHave, and Lou worked for many years on the board of one of the largest community radio stations in the United States. It's down in Florida. They had a budget, I think, of $1.5 million and 150 volunteers. And so he was the first person I spoke to, because he's also a retired lawyer. I thought, well, that's kind of handy. We'll get all our documents for free. And then I spoke to, of course, Eric Husfeld, of course, because it was his idea, and told him that there were people excited about doing this. And he, of course, was right on board. Then I spoke with Augusta LaPay. Augusta lives here in Petite Riviere, and she hosted an all-night radio show for CBC out of Montreal. And our most recent board member is Sarah Tingley. Sarah lives just up the road from me, just outside of Petite Riviere, and she worked for both CBC Radio and CBC Television. So suddenly we had, the critical mass of people with the background, talent, and skills to actually pull this together. The fortuitous event, kind of an interesting little anecdote. I was at the LaHave Bakery, the wonderful LaHave Bakery, which is a landmark in this area, having coffee with Lou, or about to, and the owner, Gail Watson, said, "Oh, what brings you to the bakery?" And I said, "Well, I'm having a meeting about starting a community radio station." And she looked surprised and then delighted and said, "Well, where's it going to be?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." And she said, "If you got 5 minutes." And she took me across the road, and she had just bought the old bank building across from the bakery and said, "Well, we're looking for a good tenant. How'd you like to have the radio station right here?" So I was able to go to that meeting with Lou 10 minutes later and say, "I think I got a place for our studio."
I love the fact, Don, that it's the personnel, where it's going, the geographic location, it's all within a couple of city blocks, I suppose, in a certain way,
Well,
which is sort of how things work around here, right?
yeah. Well, our mandate is to serve the communities, plural, from LaHave down to Vogler's Cove, but in interior from there. And because this is going on the web as opposed to a tower, in theory, you could be listening to it in Sweden or South Africa, but the mandate for this is to do community radio for that particular demographic and pulled together by people in that demographic and stories of interest to people who live there. At the same time, if you live in Halifax or in Hammonds Plains and you wake up on a Saturday morning, we can tell you 50 good reasons for coming down the South Shore to our community to see and be part of some interesting activities. We have beautiful beaches here, but we've got a whole lot more, and the radio station will be a showcase for those, that talent and for those interests.
Yeah, and it's I mean, I love radio, and I know just from our conversations that you do too. There is something about radio, and there's something about it as a platform, right? Like versus, heaven forbid, the greatest of them all is newspapers, but there's newspaper. You're not putting out a paper. You're not doing a TV show. You're not, you're bridging a couple of worlds, but it's radio. What's great about radio in your view?
The thing about radio and what I've always loved about radio is about storytelling. It's about people telling us what's happened in their lives or places they've been or things they've heard. And stories are what makes radio, because radio, of course, has no visual element. So it all has to take place in your mind. And those words have to be beautiful, exciting, lively words that then create these pictures in your head. And radio is able to do that through the nuances of voice and style and content. So we're all about storytelling. We have great stories in this particular part of Nova Scotia, and the radio will, as I say, be a showcase for those stories.
Yeah, and you touch on the storytelling and the oral kind of way it is in Nova Scotia and in many parts of Nova Scotia, and particularly the South Shore. This might not. Would I be right in thinking this might not work everywhere? If you've got if you don't have those stories, for example.
Well, I think I would agree with you. I don't want to make this part of the world sound like it's unlike any other, but I guess in some senses it is. It has an abundance of great stories. It has history. Where I'm sitting right now, I'm looking out at a property that dates back to 1734, and the farmer who lived on this property grew flax, and he was a weaver, and Champlain sailed ashore 2 miles from here. So we do have this. We've got lots of history here. We've got interesting people who both have lived here for a long time and people who are new to the area. I like to call them, they just not necessarily come by chance, it's more come by choice. And those people have moved here and created a really interesting, vibrant community. Just over my shoulder there, that's art by an artist whose house I can walk to from here, and on those bookshelves, there's books from local authors. So we are fortunate here in this particular part of Nova Scotia to have lots of stories and some really good storytellers.
Mm-hmm. Just tell us some of the nuts and bolts, Don, if you would. So it's going to be Saturdays.
So we're going to be launching. At this point, we're just saying early in the new year. I'm reluctant to put an actual date on it. Sometime between middle of January and middle of February is what we're shooting for. We're going to start with programming on Saturdays. We hope to do 12 hours of Saturday programming, and then once that's up and running, then we can have more days. And eventually, we'd like to be broadcasting 7 days a week, but initially Saturdays. And we'll be starting with programming in the morning to encourage people to get out and do things on a Saturday, whether they live here or they're coming here from some other part of Nova Scotia. So it'll be, what's happening today, on the South Shore. During the course of the day, there'll be broadcasting of all shapes and sizes. Remember, this is about information. It's about cultural content. We're not playing top 10 songs here. It's about, as I say, stories and information. So there'll be programs on hiking in the outdoors. There's a broadcaster, or at least a programmer, who wants to do a show all about the oceans, everything to do with the oceans. That could be surfing, that could be whale watching, all those sorts of things. Or it could be something practical, like we're going to have shows about gardening through the whole of the year, things you can do every month of the year. And lots of music. Lots of music. There is a disproportionate number of really fine musicians and composers and musical people who live in this area, and would be happy to feature them. Plus, one of the other important aspects of this is whenever anyone is coming to this area who we think will be of interest to people here. So somebody's arriving here from, I'll make this up, coming from England to have a local art show, if that would be possible. I want to get a hold of that person 2 or 3 weeks in advance, interview them, and then when they're here for that show, people will know all about them, and they'll be coming to those events and celebrating those events. So we hope it will help serve people coming here as well, plus the people who live here already.
So the mix of programming is kind of, it's evolving, I'm assuming, as we sit here today.
Well, we're nailing it down as we speak. There is no shortage of people who have offered or asked to do things, like the gentleman who wants to do the show on the ocean, a local establishment, restaurateur. He wants to do a show about with the local public school kids, talking about cooking, which I think is a great idea. We've got a local bookstore here. We have restaurants here. We've got people who teach surfing. Their content is not our challenge. What our challenge is to pick the best that we have here, get it into the 12-hour slot for Saturdays, and then expand from that. One of the key services we're going to be providing is in training broadcasters of all ages, so that people who want to host the show and have something interesting to say, that's great, but there is a style and a nuance to being on the radio, and that's where Augusta LaHave with her and Sarah, with their years at CBC, will be coming into the mix here. And so, starting probably in the next couple of weeks, we'll be training broadcasters to go on air, how to speak, how to enunciate, how to engage an audience, and that we think will be a great service to the community.
Don, do you see any sort of synchronicity with the community college, say, or the journalism school or anything like that? That seems like a great apprenticeship kind of program,
Yes, we have spoken both with the local Nova Scotia Community College, and I have spoken with my friends and colleagues at the University of King's College School of Journalism, on the former head of the radio program, for example, Doug Cockraldy. I briefed him on this, and he's very, very interested. And I know that the King's Radio journalism program did have an affiliation with the radio station at Dalhousie. I think that's no longer going. I could be wrong there, but we're certainly going to reach out to them and offer to take in interns or have students come and do some work at the station, or if they have recorded some material through the radio program that we'd be happy to rebroadcast it here. So no, there's all those opportunities. And as I mentioned earlier, the principal of the local school has asked if the young people there can be involved, and the answer was yes, absolutely. We have a local doctor, psychotherapist, who's asked if she can do a show on mental health, and we said, no question, that's a pressing need for all Nova Scotians, and we're delighted that people are stepping forward to see where we can work together.
And you want to hear, if people do want to get involved in some way, and there's many ways, it sounds like, you want to hear from them in some fashion, I guess.
Absolutely. We've got a website we're just finishing building, and I hope that will be up probably in the next three or 4 weeks. And we have opportunities for people to serve on various committees. So if you have skills in the radio area, if you have writing skills, or if you just have ideas for good programming, yes, we'd be delighted to hear from you. We will be having an open house before we go live. So that'll be sometime, as I said, January, February. And also in February, we're going to be hosting a big fundraiser here in Petite Rivière with fine art and of all kinds. And so that will be announced, and I hope that will also be a place for people to hear more about us and see what we're doing. So no, we're all about volunteers. None of us are getting paid for this. It's all done by volunteers, and so we're looking forward to having more people join us, either on a one-off basis or on one of our many committees. It's an exciting opportunity for people to get involved.
Mm-hmm. And I guess if somebody wanted to give some money, you would accept that too?
Well, we would be happy to do that. We're going to have a button on our website where you can donate. Locally here, we're doing a 50-50 draw with a restaurant, the Osprey's Nest, and they're supporting us through that. We have had donations. I was delighted to get a $1,000 anonymous donation from someone who just was thrilled that we're doing this and wishes us well. So, and we were very fortunate last week to win the Awesome Foundation's $1,000 award for this month for the best new venture. And that was very reassuring. The Greater Petite Area Community Association we submitted a grant application and they've supported us. So we're getting help of financial help and moral support from all quarters, and we're delighted. There has been a real groundswell. I ran into our former MP recently, Bernadette Jordan, and she said, "Hi, Don. How's the radio station?" I thought, well, that's a good sign. That's a good sign. People are talking about it and excited, looking forward to hearing the first words or music from our radio station in the new year.
Wonderful. Don, that's great. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for
My pleasure.
enlightening us on this, and I wish you good luck. I'm sure it's going to be a great success.
Great. Thanks for your support. Appreciate it, John.